So the meeting will be called to order, and due to the Safer at Home order issued by Governor Cooper and the current pandemic, members of the Citizen Police Review Board are participating virtually. All members will vote by roll call. A member will be recognized, at which time the member will state his or her vote. So, let's start with, oh, do I hear somebody speaking up? I don't hear anybody speaking up. So how about the minutes? Everybody have a chance to read the minutes?
We may need to do the roll call first.
Oh, I guess that would be a good idea, wouldn't it?
Okay,
I was talking about the roll call, but didn't do it. Okay.
Pamela Corbett,
Here.
Leon McCullough,
He's here. I see him on, but he's muted.
He's muted.
Emma James, Kathy McLean,
Here.
Michael Fraden,
Present.
Beverly Carter Levy,
Here.
Juana Robach,
Present.
Theodore Chun, Annika Annette.
Here.
I think Mr. McCullough's trying to speak now, maybe.
Leon, are you on mute? Well, you are on mute.
Yeah.
There you go.
Also.
Okay.
I had a hard time getting on. I was downstairs because my wife was in the meeting upstairs, and it just wouldn't act right, you know.
We're glad you could join us.
Yes.
Okay. So we have a quorum, as I heard. How about the minutes? Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes? Are there any corrections to the minutes? Absent that, do I hear a motion to have them approved?
I make a motion we approve the minutes.
Do we need a second for that, Angela?
Second.
Okay, we got both, Beverly and Leon. So roll call to vote in favor?
Pamela Corbett,
Yes.
Leon McCullough,
Yes.
Emma James, Brittany Spees. Brittany just came on. Kathy McLean,
Yes.
Michael Fraden,
Yes.
Beverly Carter,
Yes.
Juana Robach,
Yes.
Theodore Chun, Annika Annette,
Yes.
Kristen Beatty is not here.
Okay. So the minutes are approved. And we now move to the introduction of the Professional Standard Division Sergeant. Who would be whom?
Hello, how is everyone this evening?
Doing well,
you.
thank you.
My name is Sergeant George. Normally Captain Gomez would be sitting in on the meeting, but he's on vacation with his family. So I'm filling in for him. And I have with me Sergeant Snow. He's the newest member of the Professional Standards Division. And I'm going to allow him to introduce himself real quick.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sergeant Snow, Mark Snow. I've been with the police department for about 26 and a half years. Just recently assigned to the Professional Standards Division.
Welcome. New member? Do we have a new member?
He's not able to attend. We spoke with him during the new member orientation session, and he advised us that he had a previously scheduled meeting. So he'll be introduced at our April meeting.
Okay. Well, we're checking these off.
What was his name? The new person?
Christian Beatty.
Thank you.
Okay.
Did you say Beatty or Bailey?
Beatty.
Thank you.
I wanted to also know, again, Sergeant Snow, he's taking Gomez's place?
No.
Okay, just
So we had one of our sergeants retire recently, and he's taken over that spot. So we have 4 sergeants in BSD. And Captain Gomez, he's just on vacation this week, so he couldn't be here for the meeting. And we also have Assistant Chief Wilson Weaver present, and Captain Katie Allen, who's going to do a presentation later in the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we have reports from the nominating committee. Who is going to take that on?
Hi, this is Beverly. I'm supposed to, but I had problems with my computer today downloading my documents. So I know we had Tawana for president, but if someone else from the nominating committee could go ahead and do the report, I could not print off my documents today. And we had 2 for vice president.
Okay, so Tawana, did you say was also on your committee?
Tawana was on our committee and she's actually one of the nominees for president. So if one of the other ladies can give the report, I could not get anything what was on my computer today.
Okay.
Well, I have my notes right here. I can just kind of
Thank you, Keisha.
briefing of the nominating. So the nominating committee met and the slate of candidates that they have for 2022 for the positions of chair and vice chair are as follows. For the position of chair, the nominating committee puts forth the name of Ms. Tawana Roebuck. And for vice chair, there are 2 names for your consideration this evening. The first being Ms. Annika Annette, and the second being Ms. Brittany Spees. And at this time, if there's anyone who would like to nominate themselves from the floor, please feel free to do so. No takers? Okay.
So in terms of a process, how do we do this from a roll call standpoint and voting?
Well, what we had discussed previously is we will have Charlene call the roll as she normally does. Since there is only 1 candidate for the position of chair, the person voting can vote either yes, no, or abstain, and that will be recorded. And then for the position of vice chair, they would respond by saying the name of the candidate for which they choose to vote, or if they choose to abstain, they can indicate that as well.
Okay, all right. So before we start the vote, I wonder if either Tawana or Brittany would care to say anything that might help us make a very difficult choice.
And also Annika and Brittany are for
That's what I meant. That's right,
Yeah.
Annika. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Mhm.
And you're on
No.
mute, Annika, and you both are on mute, Brittany and Annika. Would either of you like to say anything?
Madam Chair, do you want to go ahead and have the committee vote on the position of chair first? And then, because we need to take separate votes for chair and vice.
Do they need to be separate votes? Okay,
Yes.
all right, fine. Let's do the chair position
And,
first.
and Madam Chair, would you like me to say anything?
Sure, if you'd like to.
Well, I want to thank the nominating committee for coming together and having faith and belief in me to have the possibility of leading this group. My style of leadership is certainly by consensus. So I have an expectation that we will continue to give feedback and make the best choices in the best interest of the group and the people that we serve are members of this advisory committee. I feel honored, and I just want to encourage people to continue to support the efforts. I think I will have the title of chairperson, but certainly in my viewpoint, you can't be a chairperson alone. It takes an entire group of people and a body of people. And so I would like to let you know that I want to work in concert with you. Certainly as you think of musicians in a band, we have no solos in this band. We all are one in concert. So thank you for the opportunity.
Great, thank you. All right.
Okay. Pamela Corbett,
Yes, and I also want to express appreciation to Tawana for taking this on.
Leanne McCullough,
Yes, I have confidence in her. because I have watched her over the years. I don't think we can get anybody that with so great leadership quality than her. So I'm proud that she's moving into that position now.
Okay. Emma James. Brittany Spees.
Yes.
Okay. Kathy McLean.
Yes.
Michael Frayden.
Yes.
Beverly Carter.
Yes, and I'd also like to say I have worked with Tawana through ESR probably 20 years, and she's an excellent leader. And I hate I'm going off the committee and she's becoming in this role, but I know that she's going to lead y'all further, and you'll be a better committee because of her leadership.
Yes.
Tawana Robart.
I'd like to abstain.
Annika Annette.
Yes, yes, yes.
I guess that's everyone.
Yes, ma'am.
Just
All
so
right.
we can have it official and have the record straight, I assume, Madam Chair, you made a motion to approve Ms. Roebuck as the chair, and I assume one of the other members who would like to say they made a second.
Yes.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Then, of course, we have the roll call vote. So whoever would like to proceed,
Do we
I
need
guess,
to
to hear
announce
from
the numbers? Do we need to
She can.
announce them? I'm sorry.
Ms. Gooms, can you announce the numbers? I think it was unanimous.
Yes.
Okay. Do you want the two candidates for vice chair to make a statement before you entertain a motion?
Simply to invite you to do so if you would like, Brittany and Annika.
Sure. I don't think that there's much else that I could say to top out Madam Chair, the commentary that she made. I certainly think that the work of this board is honorable. have been happy to serve as a member of the board, and am happy going forward to assist in any way that I can. And that's all I have to say. Thank you all for your consideration.
Thank you. Annika?
Thank you. Those are beautiful sentiments. Kind of hard to follow up, but I'm very honored to have been nominated for that position as well. Every day is a learning experience for me, and I learn from all of you. I learn from even people that don't think that I'm learning from. So I know a lot of things that I say are very it just provokes some really rough dialogue that is needed some days, and I'm just honored for it to be, appreciated in this group. So I'm just looking forward to sharpening iron in this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we need to make a motion. Did I hear you say, Angela?
This is probably the first time we've had this. I guess you make a motion to proceed with the voting for the candidates for vice chair, get a second, and then you proceed with the vote by roll call as to whom you select as vice chair. And the
So we
person who gets the majority vote would be the person who's selected as vice chair.
Okay, at least two motions, maybe three. Go ahead, Kathy.
Is there any venue for a secret ballot? I mean, everyone seems great. I feel like I'm at a slumber party picking the winner, the prom queen. Is that
Good.
like against the rules?
Yes, it is.
How do we do it in person? Do we write it down and hand it off to?
Then we could figure something out.
Well, I was getting ready to say this is the first time we've actually had two candidates ever for.
That's what I was gonna say. The 2 years that I've been on it, we've never had to vote.
There's a slot on Zoom that give you the opportunity to vote.
Or
Where
if
is
there,
it?
whoever's, if there's a host,
Being a
if there's-
public body, I mean,
There's
there's
a
some rules in terms of voting, and secret ballots are not one of those processes that's listed. So
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm just glad we'll all still be best friends.
Right. So let me just recap here. So it sounds like you're saying, Angela, that we need to proceed live. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm making a motion that we approve this slate of 2 candidates for vice chair. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second it.
Okay, Leanna seconded. So we will have to vote on it, I hope.
I think the
have to-
motion really should be that we proceed with the voting process for the 2 candidates. And then you get a second with that, and then you list the candidates, and then they will identify which candidate they want to vote in favor of. So that's your
Okay.
motion. You got a second, and now Charlene will do the roll call.
Okay,
Pamela Corbett,
yes.
Leanne McCullough,
Yes.
Emma James, Brittany Spees,
Yes.
Kathy McLean,
Yes.
Michael Fraden,
Yes.
Beverly Carter Levy,
Yes.
Tawana Robach,
Yes.
Theodore Chun, Annika Annette.
Yes.
So in essence, what you've done is close the nomination process. So now you have 2 candidates, and so you all have to make a decision. And again, it's an open process, and I'm sure both ladies will understand that it's a matter of moving forward with the business of the Citizen Police Review Board, and neither will hold your decision or your vote against you.
I'd like to suggest that in the future, everything is new, that perhaps in the future, we look at our bylaws, just in case this occurs again, and we have processes in place, that we could potentially vote secretly. But I think it's something we need to examine in the future.
The challenge is going to be your bylaws have to be compliant with state law.
That is correct.
That's where the challenge is going to be.
Okay.
And to recap, I think you're saying the state law says that the vote has to be transparent.
I don't see a provision for a secret ballot, essentially, is what I'm saying. So I think the best thing to do is go ahead and be transparent.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So proceed with, I guess, the roll call.
Pamela Corbett,
Brittany,
Leanne McCullough,
Annette.
Brittany Spees,
I would like to abstain.
Kathy McLean,
Brittany.
Michael Fraden,
I would choose Brittany, my colleague, for most of my career.
Beverly Carter,
Brittany,
Tawana Robach,
Annika,
Theodore Chun, Annika Annette.
Abstain.
Okay. We have 4 for Brittany Spees and 2 for Annette.
so
I
based on the,
have a question, if possible. I don't know if it's possible or not, but the ones that that's up for a position, is that possible that we can actually, the ones that did not get that position, actually figure out a way to shape and mold them for future reference to move into that position after the other people's term is over with? Is that possible?
I would think that's possible. I guess it's almost like you asking for a vice chair and wait, which is not a, I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead. So,
It's not a position in your bylaws, but certainly you could amend your bylaws to provide for such. You probably need to, I think you need to give notice of that amendment and then certainly vote on it, but that's certainly something you can consider.
mm.
I'm sure
So-
if that's something the chair and the body would like for staff to look at, we can certainly do that if that's the consensus of the body. A proposed amendment to the bylaws. For
So
a
perhaps we can put that on the agenda for the next meeting to talk about that.
That'd be fine.
Leon, what do you think?
That's a good idea.
Okay. So Angela, did you say I need to make a motion to accept this ballot?
I would think so, since we had to accept as vice chair, Ms. Brittany Spees.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is to make a motion to both congratulate and to accept the candidates of Tawana Roebuck for chair and Brittany Spees as vice chair for this next year for this board. So that's my motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Leon, thank you. We need to do a roll call on that one.
Yes.
Pamela Corbett,
Yes.
Ian McCullough,
Sure.
Emma James, Brittany Spees,
Yes.
Kathy McLean,
Yes.
Michael Fraden,
Yes.
Beverly Carter Levy,
Yes.
Tawana Roebuck,
Yes.
Theodore Chun, Jackie Perkins,
Yes.
Kristen Day.
Okay.
That is.
Can someone refresh
Yeah.
my memory? How long is the term? How long a term do they serve?
1 year.
1 year. Okay, thank you.
That is such a good question.
Yeah. Now's a good time to find out after the doors close.
Mhm.
4 years.
Yeah. Another question. When does my term end? I know it's coming soon. You know?
Ours is in
You
April.
have, Mr. McCullough, your membership list.
Yes,
It's April.
I have it with me now.
Yes.
I left everything on the other computer that was messing up downstairs, but
It looks like it's April 2023.
okay.
Are you staying?
Is it possible?
What do you mean, is it possible?
Oh, you
April
say
2020.
yes.
I didn't quite hear you.
I'm gonna pray about that.
Oh, come on, come
Leave
on.
early.
Yeah, Mr. McCullough is April 2023, not
Yes.
2022.
Okay, I know.
I thought he heard me. It's April 2023.
But mine's 2022, isn't it, Angela?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I thought so.
Are you staying?
Yes.
To April, I ain't got a choice.
We'll
Neither
talk
does Leon.
offline.
Neither does Leon, actually. So my appreciation, I want to extend that to the nominating committee. Great job, and appreciate your efforts. So unless Angela tells me otherwise, let's move on to new business. Is there any?
I don't
Got the
think there is any
presentation?
official new business, but what I did want to point out, it's not on the agenda, and some of you may be wondering where it is. And I mentioned it in the email. Normally, the departmental statistics report that Captain Gomez would normally give at the meeting, those statistics were not available due to a various number of reasons. And so that information for be actually the end of 2021 and the first quarter of 2022 will be presented at your April meeting. So I just wanted to address why that wasn't on the agenda.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair, if we could, and I know it's always in our packet, so I want to make sure that we send it out in advance so we have an opportunity to review it. And if we as a group could advance and be prepared to certainly acknowledge what we have received, as well as to be prepared with any questions that we might have as well.
Okay, quick question. Have you received my package, the package that we mailed out? Have you received the package in the mail?
I got a package that you mailed out,
Yes.
but just as she stated, it did not include the report, the quarterly
Oh,
report.
okay.
and that it'll be sent out in April. That's what I understood you to say. And so my statement is we don't meet again until April, if possibly, if that could be sent out at least 2 weeks in advance so that we have a chance to read it and review it in case we've got questions or just for our critical learning in our April meeting, we'll be prepared. I saw head nods, so there is a possibility to send this out in advance.
Well, it
Normally the-
usually is,
Yeah,
but
Yes.
the mail is less than reliable these days. Whether it's weather or the post office, I'm not sure. But it usually is sent out with
Right.
plenty of time to read. And as was done this time, you also sent electronically.
Yes.
And that was last week sometime, I think, maybe even further.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so we have with us this evening Captain Katie Allen, and she is going to teach us some stuff. Katie, tell us a little, welcome first of all. Thank you for joining us. And
Thank you
tell
for
us a little-
having me.
Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So my name is Katie Allen, and I am currently a captain in the Support Services Bureau at the Police Department. I've worked at the department for 22 years, and I'm a lifelong resident of Winston-Salem. Went to Mount Tabor High School, so I'm born and raised here, very familiar with the city. I have been what we call a SCAT instructor, so that stands for Subject Control Arrest Techniques. The simple way to say it is a use of force instructor. So I've been a use of force instructor here at the department since, I can't remember, it's either late 2003 or early 2004. I was our lead use of force instructor for about 4 years, and I hold a variety of other certifications in the area of use of force. And currently I serve as the chairwoman of our departmental use of force committee. So got a long background in use of force. So that's me in a nutshell. So I'm going to go over just some things tonight with you guys. And if you want me to jump right in, I'll jump right in unless you have anything you want to add before I begin.
Not I, take it away.
Okay. So I want to start by first saying thank you for having me, and thank you all for your service. I know it's a big time commitment and sounds like several year commitment that you have serving on this committee. So your work is important, and I appreciate you allowing me to be here. Use of force is a very complex topic. So what I'm going to do tonight is give you a very condensed Reader's Digest version of use of force, and how and why we are allowed to use force, and what type of force we're allowed to use in these circumstances when we have to use it, just so that when you review cases, your group will hopefully have a better understanding of our decision making and the laws surrounding that. So I'm going to share my screen here. See if I can get this up. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me get it going here. So use of force, I'm going to break this down into 3 areas, and feel free as I'm going through, if you guys have questions, just to shout one out. I'll be happy to answer. It's kind of going to all build one section to the other, so I may push your question off to the end if it's going to be answered at the end, but I'm certainly happy to answer your questions. So we are governed in how we use force by state statute, so the North Carolina state statute, by case law, and by the policies of our department. So there's 3 different areas that kind of come into play when we talk about how we're allowed to use force. So the first area I'm going to talk about is just the state statute, and this is just what gives us the right as law enforcement officers to use force. Doesn't mean we have to use force, it just gives us the right to do that if we need to. So the statute that we look at is 15A 401D, and there's 2 sections that I'm going to cover briefly. There's D1 and there's D2. D1 is non-deadly force. So this would be force, as you can see right there, that is not likely to cause death. So this would just be anything, a joint manipulation. Putting somebody in handcuffs can technically kind of be considered a use of force. Pressure point, stunning techniques, taser, OC, all those things fall into this category. So we are justified to use force upon somebody else, and you're going to see this word reasonably over and over. When and to the extent that I reasonably believe it necessary, and we'll cover what reasonably means here in a few minutes. So I'm allowed to use force to prevent somebody from escaping or to effect an arrest of a person who I reasonably believe has committed a criminal offense unless I know that offense is unauthorized. So I have to have probable cause to make an arrest. I can't falsely arrest somebody and use force. But if this person, if I'm trying to effect an arrest and I need to use force, again, doesn't mean I have to, but I am allocated and allowed to do this if I need to. The other time that I can use non-deadly force is to defend myself or to defend somebody else from what I reasonably believe to be the use or imminent use of physical force while I'm attempting to effect an arrest. And so imminent simply means that it's about to happen. So I don't have to wait to be punched in the face before I'm allowed to use some force to try to prevent that from happening. And this would be all in how an officer articulates what they're seeing. So if I go out to a scene and I'm having to serve a warrant and I go to this house and I'm arresting Joe Smith. And when I get there, I find Joe Smith and Joe Smith says, I'm not going back to jail. You're going to have to fight me first. And he starts rolling up his sleeves. And when I go to try to put him in custody, he puts his fists up and he says, come on, let's do this. Then I can clearly articulate that there's an assault about to happen. And so that would be the imminent use of physical force. And that basically says that I can use some force to try to prevent myself from being injured. Or if I pull up on a scene and I see a man assaulting a woman, I can use force to get that to stop because I'm protecting her as well. So those are the two instances when we can use non-deadly force. Next, we move into 15A 401D2, which is deadly force. It's kind of similar in how it reads. And this is any force that would possibly cause death to a subject. Doesn't necessarily mean it will, but using a firearm is deadly force, but it's not limited to a firearm. It's anything that could cause death. So a car, a knife, a brick, a bat, anything that somebody could use to cause death. So we are allowed to use deadly physical force. And again, there's that word reasonable that we talk about. And I can use deadly force to defend myself or somebody else from what I reasonably believe to be the use or imminent use of deadly physical force. So that word imminent is there again, meaning that I do not have to wait until somebody points a gun and shoots it at me before I can shoot them. I have to be able to clearly articulate why I found this to be that their use of deadly force imminent, like what made me think that they were getting ready to fire. And that could be anything from what they've said, what they've done, what the whole circumstances of the offense are. Or if somebody starts shooting at me, clearly I'm trying to defend myself from being shot at or something like that. So that's the little more self-explanatory part of that. The next part is broken down into kind of two sections. And so the first part of subsection B of this is pretty much the same as one. So we're allowed to use deadly force to arrest or prevent the escape from custody of a person who is attempting to escape by means of a deadly weapon. So an example of this would be, let's say I go to the Bank of America on a bank robbery call and I pull in the parking lot. And as I'm pulling in, the bad guy's running out and he's pointing his gun and he starts firing suppressive fire at me. Well, he's attempting to escape or evade arrest by means of a deadly weapon. So that's why I can use deadly force against him, but I'm also defending myself against a deadly physical force. So it's kind of incorporating that first subsection as well. The second part of this is somebody by their conduct or any other means indicates that he presents an imminent threat of death or serious physical injury to others unless apprehended without delay. And so the best instance I think I can give you of this one would be like a active assailant. So you go in, like we go into a movie theater, and as we go into a movie theater, we have to, pass 10 people that have been shot. This shows clearly that this person's conduct, they present an imminent threat. Whoever committed this crime presents an imminent threat of death or serious physical injury to others unless they're apprehended without delay. So I would be able to use deadly force on that person should I encounter that suspect in that circumstance. And obviously that's just a very gray circumstance. There'd be a lot more that would go into it, but that's the best, I think, example I can give you. The third subsection of this statute is to prevent the escape from a person who, from custody, who has been convicted of a felony. Now, we do not use this in the police department here. So we just tell our officers, this is the statute. They understand what the statute is because they have to know it in order to get through their training. but we do not use this. So we do not ever shoot or use deadly force against somebody who is simply trying to escape and they've been convicted of a felony. This would be more for like prisons and jails and things like that. So we do not use this portion of the statute at all, and our officers are not authorized to use it in these circumstances. So that kind of hits the statutes of how we are legally able to use force. Does anyone have any questions on that part of it?
So it says on the slide that the police department does use this. So
I'm sorry, there should be a not. That's a typo on my part, and I'm glad you caught that. Thank you so much. We do not use that. We do not use that. Yes, I do apologize. So any questions at all? All right, so we'll move into the next section, which deals with case law. And there's a lot of reading here. I'm not going to read it to you. But this case goes into that word reasonableness that I talked about in the first section. So this case actually is a Supreme Court case that came out of Charlotte, back when before they were Charlotte Met Police Department, they were just Charlotte Police Department. So in this case, a gentleman by the name of Graham, Mr. Graham, was a passenger in a vehicle, and Mr. Graham is a diabetic, and he was having a diabetic emergency. Mr. Graham had his driver, whoever was driving him, pull into a convenience store. Mr. Graham quickly ran inside to get some juice. Upon running inside, he saw that the line was really, really long and knew he could not wait. So he immediately ran back out, jumped in the car, and took off. Well, an officer saw this and thought, that looks very suspicious. It could easily have been a robbery or something. He didn't know what was going on. So he decided to make a stop of this vehicle to determine if a robbery or something had taken place at the store. Upon pulling the car over, Mr. Graham jumped out. He was acting very unusually. He ran laps around the car, and they ended up detaining him in handcuffs. The officers ended up causing some injuries to Mr. Graham, and ultimately they determined that there was not a robbery, it was a medical emergency. And so he was released from the handcuffs, but Mr. Graham ended up suing the Charlotte Police Department for excessive force. So this case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and where they looked at what is defined as excessive force and what is defined as reasonable. And so this is where this term of reasonableness comes out when they look at use of force. And basically what they're saying is when they look at reasonableness of force, they look at a couple different issues. One is the severity of the crime at issue. So in this case, it was a potential robbery of a business, whether the subject poses an immediate threat to the officer or others, and whether they are attempting to actively resist arrest or attempting to evade arrest. When you're looking at what is reasonable when you're talking about use of force, the court said it's really important that you have to look and you have to judge an incident by the perspective of a reasonable officer on that scene. So you don't have the advantage of using slow-mo on a camera to slow down and see what happened and lighting, daylight, things like that. You have to judge this by what another reasonable officer would do in that exact moment with that exact same set of circumstances, with the same physical conditions, all those different things. So you don't have the luxury of looking at things with 20 hindsight. The last part they talked about is that you have to consider that officers are having to make split-second decisions in what they termed tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving situations. And so, as you all know, and everybody's seen plenty of videos, officers are forced to make decisions regarding force very, very quickly. And so it's why sometimes, they learn later that the gun was a toy gun. An officer doesn't have the ability in that moment to determine or to differentiate this was a toy gun and this was a real gun. So the circumstance behind everything is tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving. So that goes into the reasonableness of it. So a little more on this, and I kind of hit on that already. You're looking at any sort of incident from the perspective of the officer, not from the perspective of a bystander. And you have to view things from what that officer was able to see. So when you're looking at an incident, sometimes a camera angle from a citizen watching it might be different than what the officer was able to see. So you're always looking at it from the perspective of the officer. The totality of the circumstances is really important. And this is why when we teach this, we talk about how important it is to document thoroughly, because we always say, if you didn't write it, it didn't happen. And so it's important to paint the entire picture of a situation. If I go to a call and I'm a 5'2" officer that weighs 110 pounds and the guy I'm trying to arrest is 6'2", 250, that might escalate my level of force because I'm at a significant disadvantage. If I'm having to try to arrest somebody and we've been engaged in a scuffle and now my hand is broken, or now I don't have access to my firearm or my baton or some sort of piece of equipment, all that comes into play as to whether the force you used was reasonable in that moment. The lighting, the ground conditions, whether you've been in a prolonged struggle, whether you've lost your radio and you don't have the ability to call for help, all these things go into determining whether force used is reasonable. And then the other part of this is the amount of force. And that's where it's important for our officers to understand what they can and can't do. And the way I always teach this is to say, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so a perfect example of this, and I'll get into our continuum here in a minute, but let's say we have two of our big, huge guys that work at the police department, and they go to a call and they're 6'2", 250, and they go to a disturbance call and they walk in and it's a mother who's called in and she's got an 11-year-old daughter who is out of control and throwing things and, punching the wall and things like that. It's a common call that we would get. And let's say the 11-year-old girl walks up and kicks one of the officers in the shin. Well, by the letter of the law, that officer has been assaulted. And by our policy, that officer would be able to use a baton, use a taser, use OC, punch her in the face. Those are all things that are at that level of force, but is it reasonable? And that is not a reasonable technique. So just because on paper he was assaulted and you're at this level of force doesn't mean that we're going to find you reasonable and that you could still be found that you have used excessive force in that instance, because we can say these two guys should have been able to control this 11-year-old without having to do this, if that makes sense. And so then the other parts of reasonableness that go into this is looking at the person's ability to be able to carry out a threat. So if I'm, let's say I go and I'm dealing with a patient, an elderly person that's in a wheelchair, and I get there and they tell me that they're gonna, stand up and they're gonna kick my butt. Well, they don't have the ability or capability to do that. So just because they've made this threat to me doesn't mean that using force against that person would be reasonable. They also have to have the opportunity to carry out that threat. So we get threatened all the time. Once we've got somebody in custody or once somebody's behind the door at the jail where they say, I'm going to kick your butt, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Well, they don't have the ability or the opportunity to commit that assault or to commit that threat. And so that doesn't mean that we are justified to use force against them. They have to be able to have that present so that we would be able to use force in this circumstance. Same with intent, that kind of falls along those same lines. We get all this junk talking a lot when people they're either going to be arrested or we're on a scene, but we're looking for what the intent is with that act. Do they have the ability to do it? Do they have the opportunity to do it? And is it going to assist them in their furtherance of a crime or threat? Again, once already mentioned, it is up to the officer to be very, very clear and document all the factors that led up to the force that they are going to use in these circumstances. And you have to look at these circumstances objectively and not subjectively. You're looking at facts and you're not looking at a person's intent or motivation. You are just looking at the facts of a case. Which is why, we've had instances where officers have done a poor job of documenting a use of force case. And then you go and talk to them and they say, well, this, and this happened. And you're like, why didn't you write that down? And so we really spend a lot of time teaching, especially new officers, that a lot of detail really needs to go into these use of force reports. Because you think about presenting this to just a jury or anybody who doesn't really have an understanding of use of force, and you really want to paint that picture. Now we do have the luxury of having cameras that we can show the scene, but you really want to paint what you were feeling in that moment, what you were dealing with as an officer, what you were seeing as an officer, and not just let that camera, because the camera may not catch every single angle. You may have seen something because, those cameras can get knocked off in struggles. And so you just have to really paint that picture so people understand why you chose to do what you did. Does anyone have any questions on the reasonableness portion of it?
Hey, I don't have a question on this part. Everything is pretty like straight to the point. You're explaining it like very well, but I kind of wanted to backpedal a little bit. I apologize. Ms. Corbett asked a question, and I think it was, do you guys practice, I think, was it the deadly force, Ms. Pam?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
The last slide that we were on before we came to the
Let me go
court.
back. Hold on.
Oh, it was the
This one right
absence of
here?
yeah.
Yes,
Was it-
yes.
So my
It's-
question, because if you read the very last line, it didn't align with what,
Correct. And that was a typo. We do not use that last subsection.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
I know you're fine. You're fine. It was confusing. I typed it wrong. So, any other? Oh, sorry.
I have two questions. What do you
Sure.
mean by OC?
Oh, I'm so sorry. So OC, it stands for oleo resin capsicum, and it's basically pepper spray.
Oh, pepper spray.
Yes, I apologize for that. I shouldn't have used that slang terminology.
Okay. And the second is, how do you objectively assess intent if it's in the head?
So, well, so that's a little bit harder to do, but you're looking at what has led up to this point. So you're looking at what they have said, what their actions have been. So like if I'm on a scene and I think somebody's intent that they might flee from the scene, that their intent is getting ready to be that they're going to flee, I'm going to start considering all the things that lead up to that. I'm going to be watching, what are their eyes doing? Are they looking for avenues of escape? Are they starting to shift their weight? Are they starting to look for things? So some of those can go into intent that I can reasonably say that by his actions, I felt like this person was getting ready to flee. Or same with intent of like the example I gave you earlier about the warrant service with the subject that said, you're gonna have to fight me first. The intent is initiating that overt act of saying, rolling up their sleeves and said, come on, let's do this. And so it's not necessarily all just a mental state, but that's kind of going into their mental state of this is what their goal is at this point. This man's goal was to fight me first, or this man's goal was to flee from the scene. And again, all that is up to the officer to paint that picture and to say, this is what I observed. These are the facts as how I saw them in that moment. And so we just have to be very, very clear in how we articulate that. And sometimes officers are not good at that. Sometimes they don't do a good job.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay,
Sure.
I have another question, because officers are regular human beings.
Yes.
Deal with toils of life and the different problems. Do y'all have a program that can catch a person when they almost get ready to go off? I mean, like a divorce. Somebody getting a divorce, that causes a little bit more anxiety.
Yes.
Other things, do y'all have a program that can pinpoint that officer before he do step out of line? You know
Yes.
what I'm saying?
That's an excellent question. And it's actually, that's becoming an increasing talk just nationwide in policing and addressing the stresses and issues that law enforcement officers face. So within the police department, we have a multitude of different things available. We have an employee assistance program, which offers free counseling to officers. And that program, we can make mandatory referrals. So if I, as a supervisor, start to recognize that one of my employees is starting to show signs of maybe they're coming into work late, maybe there's some issues with drinking, things like that, I can contact professional standards, and if it's a significant enough issue, we can make them go to the counselor. They can also go on their own independently and get free treatment through a counselor. We have peer support groups, and so we have officers that have been trained to speak with other officers. So a lot of times you feel better talking to someone else who has been through a lot of the experiences that you've shared. So we have peer counseling. We also have a huge wellness program. Right now, one of our corporals started this whole program, and it offers a lot of things to help our officers: meditation, yoga, just different things to kind of de-stress, because it is a very stressful job. And then our professional standards sergeants can probably speak a little more to this, but we do an early warning system. So if we have officers that have a lot of incidents, it flags them in the system and we can start reviewing those things.
Hi, this is Beverly Carter Levy. Can you hear me? I'm on my phone now.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, my question is, how often do you reiterate these? I mean, I'm assuming that you get these taught during the rookie stage, so to speak, but how often are these rules gone over or additional training given?
So they go through a significant amount of this training in recruit school, and then we offer an additional 4 hours of subject control training every year, where we go through all of these different things. We go through our policies, we go through our Force Continuum, which you're going to see here in a minute. And that's not required through the state. It's something that our department requires. And then we require annual training in both taser and our pepper spray. And then also baton is every other year, I believe. And then we get all this again, and we have annual firearms training as well. And so they get the deadly force statute covered during their annual firearms training. So they get it every single year.
Thank you.
Captain Allen.
Yes, sir.
So Ms. Annette asked a question in the chat about implicit bias. Can you explain the implicit bias training, please?
Let me see. I wonder what the implicit bias training is for. So we do implicit bias training, and that is important. So we've had a variety of different implicit bias training, and so we do that so that officers are made aware, number one, of the biases that we all hold just within ourselves as human beings, and how to better understand our community, understand the people we serve, and understand how our biases can affect us in our roles as police officers. And so these trainings that we go through every year kind of open our eyes to how to prevent our own biases from affecting us as police officers and affecting what we do as police officers. It's important training that we do, and I think it's really kind of opened everybody's eyes to not being uncomfortable with the fact that, like, we know bias, we all have them, and so how we educate ourselves and train ourselves to work through those biases so they don't affect us and affect others as we perform our jobs every day. I don't know if that answers your questions. One of the other things we do that I think is really important, and this was something that Assistant Chief Penn came up with several years ago, was that we felt like our new police recruits, they're 20, 21 years old and very inexperienced in life. And so they don't have a good understanding a lot of times of the community they serve, because a lot of times they aren't from here. And then they don't understand a lot of the anger and frustrations that people that have lived through the civil rights era have faced. And so, and how those challenges can affect them and their interaction with people as they do their job. And so one thing that he has done is brought in community members that have been very instrumental in their communities during the times of civil rights, when they saw the police department, saw civil rights issues and things like that happening. And we are educating our young employees, and they're also getting they take a field trip to the Civil Rights Museum to just understand better the community they serve and some of the things that people have been through, and so that hopefully they I guess have a better relationship and understanding with one another. So I think that's really important.
I have a question.
Sure.
So my question relates to cultural differences, so that we can be aware we have a growing community in our Brown Hispanic communities. So I want to know what types of training is provided to the police force as it relates to understanding cultural and even some religious differences.
So I wouldn't be able to list everything off the top of my head, and I'm not in training right now. In the training, I could tell you some of the things we've been through. I know there's several blocks in recruit school where we talk about different community groups, and we're educated on the different groups that are out there dealing with victims in the public. And in that block of instruction, you learn about dealing with handicap, people that are deaf, different types of religious groups, different cultural groups. And so they teach you a lot of different things about, you may go to one house and the male of the home may not want you to speak to the female, the wife. And so we learn about a lot of that in recruit school. And so it's very valuable training. And so that's a big block of instruction in recruit school.
Let me also interject too. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
Let me also interject. I'm Assistant Chief Weaver. I am the Assistant Chief over the Patrol and Special Operations Divisions. Let me also add that as Captain Allen was just talking about some of the cultural differences, that also includes dealing with the LGBTQIA+ community, as well as being aware of all of the different factors that go together with just being human. So we try and teach our officers those kinds of things because of the way that they may have been raised or the way that they grew up or the environment that they lived in. They may not have had any exposure to those types of characteristics that occur throughout the community. And so we want them to be aware of those types of things so that once they're going in, they're doing all that they know to do to try and literally help people in our community. And regardless of what kind of circumstance the person's living in, that training becomes valuable to them because they can start trying to relate to people and hopefully have people relate to us. Additionally, the state of North Carolina requires every year that law enforcement officers across the state do some type of minority sensitivity training, as well as training that has to deal with some of the juveniles and some of the juvenile issues that are going on, such as gang recruitment, things along those lines. So our officers have that information that they have to get through a state mandate every year.
Thank you, Officer Weaver. Sometimes there's conversation about the sense of perception that some of our people have regarding the number of stops that are made specifically on Waterworks Road. So is there feedback in terms of what the response is to deal with the perception that one might have with things that are related to the stops that take place on Waterworks Road?
So being over Patrol Division, I can't specifically advise of any type of specific thing that's going on with Waterworks Road. What I will tell you is that as the Patrol Division Assistant Chief, I get either a phone call or an email every single day from across the city where people are concerned about speeding going on through the neighborhoods. And so if those stops are going on, it's because we're having issues with speeding in our neighborhoods. We're trying to deal with some of that because of the number of literally fatality accidents we've had in our city going across each year. And so we're trying to deal with some of the speeding that you see that's going on out here. Keep in mind that anytime a law enforcement officer stops a vehicle, they have to have reasonable suspicion that some type of crime is being committed, whether that's nothing more than an infraction where someone's not wearing their seatbelt, all the way up to some type of violent crime that may occur.
All right. Are there any other questions before I move on to our continuum? All right. So you may want to, let me see if I can get this. I hope you got a copy of this, and it may be easier than to see on a copy than right in front of you, because I know the writing's kind of small. So I'll explain to you our use of force continuum, and this is specific to Winston-Salem. Every agency has a different continuum, and if you were to Google use of force continuums, you would see different versions. You'd see stair steps, you'd see circles, you'd see pyramids. So every agency does theirs differently. So ours, it doesn't work as a stair step, but this is what ours looks like. And so it all starts in the middle on that yellow line as an assessment. And so the bottom portion of the continuum is the suspect's behavior, and the top portion is the officers. And so we look from the very beginning on the assessment. And the assessment is the call type. So, and this is based on what the information that our dispatcher gets, and somebody calling in a call. And so we can't control a lot of times what somebody calls in and tells the dispatcher. You know, that's the call that came in, and so that's what we're going to go to. So the call type. So obviously you're going to have your little caution lights go up more if you're going to a bank robbery or a shooting, or an assault with a deadly weapon or something like that, versus going to, you know, vandalism to your mailbox. And so that's going to come into play as to what kind of, where you are as an officer responding to a call. Your response level is going to be our code response. And so we have code 1, code 2, and code 3. Code 1 is blue lights and sirens. Code 2 is you're going to respond to the call without delay, but without blue lights and sirens. And then code 3 is a call that may hold a little bit longer. So this would be something like a car accident with no injuries that's in a parking lot of a shopping center. And so that's going to hold a little bit longer because we have more priority calls to go to. It's a triage system, basically. Threat level is going to go into that. So when you look at the call type, officers have the ability in their car to look at the address they're going to, and they can see the call history at that house. So if I pull up the call history at a residence and I see that we've been out there 15 times on domestic violence calls in the last, 6 months, then that's going to kind of just raise my instincts as I'm going into this, because there's clearly a little bit more of a threat going into this house. It's also going to give us caution indicators with people. So if we have somebody that's a known subject of interest for bank robberies, or a gang, somebody that's validated gang member or something like that, we'll be able to see those threat levels. We also can run a name. So if we know we're going to a call and Joe Smith is at this call, I could run Joe Smith's name in my car and I could see, oh, Joe Smith's showing to have a warrant. So that's automatically going to kind of raise my level of assessment there going in. And then as we arrive at a call, we kind of make an assessment based on what we see, what we hear, and what we smell. And so sight is automatically what you're going to see. What do you see? Somebody firing a gun off a porch? Do you see somebody assaulting somebody in the front yard? Do you see nothing? Do you see somebody immediately take flight when you pull up to a house? What do you hear? Do you hear sounds of violence? Do you hear an assault taking place? Do you hear loud music? Do you hear a large crowd? What are you hearing as you pull up? And then smell, obviously, if you start smelling marijuana or something like that, it's going to raise your instincts. And then same goes with gunfire. You're going to smell that a gun went off if it just recently went off. So again, that's going to kind of all go into your baseline assessment. As I respond to this call, if I arrive and I hear that there's a huge crowd behind a house, I may go ahead and say, start me a few more units, because I don't want it to be me and 30 people. And so you're kind of just making your assessment based on that. So the next level for both the officer and the suspect, if you're kind of looking at it, and this continuum is not a stair step. So I don't have to go from presence to verbal to physical up the ladder. I may pull a car over, and the guy may get out of the car and immediately start firing the gun at me. And I've gone from presence to deadly. Because he's immediately started firing his deadly weapon at me. And we've already learned that I can start using deadly force because he's firing a gun at me. So presence is going to mean, from the officer standpoint, is how I appear. And so this is where I talked about taking into consideration your abilities and skills. So if you're a small officer who isn't as strong, who isn't as, able to handle a big bulking hulk of a person, that's going to go into play. If there's 10 officers on a scene versus a scene where there's 2 officers, that's going to come into play. And all that goes into reasonableness. I may not be reasonably able to use force if I can say that we've had 10 officers on the scene and we have the ability to control this person with this sheer volume of officers. And then my physical condition, and that can change throughout a call. Like I mentioned before, if I get into a scuffle with somebody and I get injured, let's say they knock my glasses off and I can't see, if I break my hand, if I, get injured and I fall in a hole and I trip and, sprain my ankle, all that's going to come into my abilities and my skill level. The same thing goes for presence of a suspect. And this is just kind of gauging and helping an officer gauge, like, how is this encounter going to go? And so you're looking at like, what does a person do as you approach? Are they looking you in the, are they looking you in the eye? Are they looking, like I talked about, for avenues of escape? Are they making gestures? Are they flashing gang signs? You know, what is their reaction to you arriving on the scene? Doesn't mean you're going to use force. It's just kind of giving you, adding to that assessment of like, what am I dealing with here? If I do end up having to take this person into custody, do I need to get some more people here? Is this going to be an easy incident to deal with? Will this person decide to go willingly with me? So the next level you're talking about is verbal for the officer. And this is just how we speak to people and how we are able to control a scene. And so we have different variety. And so again, just a friendly conversation, just me talking with you. That's a verbal, that's a portion of verbal. Business-like. And so you want to be very clear with people as an officer that this is what you can do and this is what you can't do. And then commanding. And so a lot of times, I see you, Ms. Roebuck, let me finish this sentence and you can ask your question. Commanding, a lot of times people view that as we have escalated force. But a lot of times people respond to a more direct command. So it may be me needing to yell to say, sit down, turn around, put whatever I'm going to yell. And it's not necessarily an escalation. It's me using my verbal presence to stop this from going any further. So verbal, even though I may be yelling, is a form of de-escalation when you're talking about looking at force. Ms. Roebuck, you can ask your question now.
So for the verbal piece, at what point do you have access to someone that can come in case there's a language differences? If the person you are arresting is Spanish speaking and perhaps the officer on the scene is not fluent in Spanish, how do you bring, and at what point do you bring someone else in that speaks Spanish?
So we have a large number of officers that are bilingual. And so we try to spread them out throughout our patrol division so that they're accessible. And so a lot of times, if they're not, we utilize people on the scene. I found that it's very unusual to not be able to find somebody on a scene that can assist you with some sort of language barrier if there is one. But we do have, and we would call them right away. I mean, if I get to a call and there's a Spanish speaker there and I can't speak to them and there's nobody there that can help me interpret, I'm immediately going to call for a Spanish speaker, or I'm going to use my cell phone. And if they can't drive all the way to me, I'm going to call a Spanish speaking officer on the cell phone and say, can you talk to this person? But we really, have a good number of officers that can assist with that. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
So the next level of force in that verbal that matches it on the suspect side is non-compliant. And so this is basically just not complying with what we're asking them to do. So it could be that I walk up to your house and I say, oh, are you Joe Smith? And Joe Smith doesn't say anything to me. That's non-compliant behavior. He's refusing to answer my questions, refusing to respond. It's just a passive type behavior. It's not any sort of physical type resistance. It's just giving me an indication that they are not complying with what I'm asking them to do. And it's kind of raising my little spidey senses that should this go bad, it may go bad. And because they're not cooperating with me already. Doesn't mean it's going to, but it just kind of raises my, maybe I need another unit here. Maybe I need to try a different approach to talk to this person. Maybe there is a language barrier. Maybe they're deaf. I don't know, but you're just kind of examining that in that situation. So the next level we get to, and this is where we start actually kind of looking at our force levels. So from the officer standpoint, is we have physical force. So physical force is going to be joint manipulation, stunning techniques, basically techniques that are going to be from the shoulders down. So anything that's up at the head or neck is going to be at a higher level of force. And so this is where we would be with just a joint manipulation, trying to get somebody's hands behind their back, things like that. And so we have stunning techniques that are strikes to large muscle masses that don't cause injury, but they do cause a stunned reaction within the body. So they activate motor nerves in the body, and it generates like a stunned response. And it's kind of like if you think about in the cartoons where somebody gets hit and they see the birdies and the stars and things like that, it gives us that, moment of 2 or 3 seconds where we can take somebody and put their hands behind their back. So those are stunning techniques. They're called hard hand techniques, but again, they're strikes below the shoulders to major muscle masses on the body. We also have some soft hand techniques. We have pressure points here that are available to us. And then we have some takedowns. So if we tackle somebody, that is a physical level of force. The behavior that matches it, where a suspect has to be in order for us to use that level of force, is resistive behavior. So resistive behavior falls into two different levels. There's passive resistance and there's active resistance. And this is kind of where you look at reasonableness. So passive resistance, if you think about, let's say I'm going to deal with a protest and there's a protester at the mall and they're holding on to a bus stop sign and they refuse to let go of that sign. And I walk up and I try to get them to put their hands behind their back and they refuse to let go. And all they're doing is clutching that pole. That's a passive form of resistance. So I'm not necessarily going to walk up and deliver a hard hand strike to this person. I may use a more soft hand approach like a pressure point or just some sort of joint manipulation, bending their wrist or something to get them off that pole. So that's a more passive type resistance. Active resistance would be somebody running, would be somebody actively pulling their arms away from you while you're trying to take them into custody. It could even be like slight like push offs. It's not like a shove, like an assault, but it's like pushing their hands off of you so that you don't take them into custody. And so that would be what we would consider to be resistive behavior. So an officer has to be able to articulate resistive behavior to use anything at that physical level of force. The next level we're talking about would be assaultive behavior for a suspect. Assaultive behavior is pretty cut and dry. So we talk about from a suspect, they're assaulting you in some manner, kicking, punching, spitting, biting, anything like that. Or it can be, as I talked about before, imminent. So we have to be able to clearly state what made me reasonably believe that this assault was imminent. Did they roll up their sleeves? Did they clench their fists? What did they do to make me feel like this behavior was imminent? From that level of force, on our end, we have incapacitating level of force. And so that's where we have personal weapon strikes to the head and neck. So you would have punches and things available to you there. We very much discourage punches, even though they're allowed and they're part of the curriculum that is taught through the state. We discourage those only because the risk of injury is so high for officers. Because unless you're like me, I'm not going to knock somebody out with a punch. I'm a small female, so I would prefer to use something different because it's not going to be an effective tool for me. And I risk a lot more injury. I risk breaking my hand, spraining my wrist, breaking my wrist, doing something, but they are available to them. We also have baton strikes. So the baton is only used to strike major muscle masses, so that we really focus on teaching at the leg, the center mass of the leg, for using that baton. And then we also have our, what it says on there, the CEW, that's going to be the taser. So that's the conducted electrical weapon, our OC spray, which is our pepper spray. And then we have just some different techniques up there. So they're a little more, I guess they're a little more harder techniques, but the behavior that the suspect is offering is a lot more significant. What I will say is we generally have officers operating one level below where they should be. So a lot of times when the suspect is offering assaultive behavior, our officers are operating at a physical level of force. I don't know why that is. It's been that way my entire career, but that's just it kind of generally happens. It doesn't happen every time, but it happens in a large majority of our cases that officers could be using a higher level of force and they don't. And then the final level of force is the deadly force situation. And again, at that point, kind of all bets are off. If somebody is trying to use deadly force against me, I can use whatever force I need to try to prevent myself or somebody else from being killed. So it could be that, like, if I'm been pushed to the ground and I don't have access to my weapons, to my gun or anything, it may be that I have to get my pen out of my pocket and I try to stab them with my pen. That may be the only thing I have available to me at that level of force. So deadly matches deadly. So they're at their suspects level, they're chokes, assaults involving vehicles, weapons, life-threatening acts against you. And then at that point, we have our firearm, baton strikes to the head. That is the only point. And we don't teach chokes, but an officer would be able to use a choke at that point. And that's the only time that they would be able to use a chokehold if they were at deadly level of force, because again, at that point, all bets are off. You're just trying to survive at that point. So that's our use of force continuum. I did see a question come up in the chat. Let's see. All right, so real quick, So Miss Brittany, I'll answer your question. She asked, we've discussed training for biases. Is there training regarding mental health? And how to assess it with citizens, officers, encounters, or as it relates to use of force and de-escalation. So yes, we do crisis intervention training, and our officers go to, that's a 40-hour block. They also get training in recruit school, but we do additional 40-hour block that officers go to that learns how to deal with people suffering from mental health crisis. And then the city is also, we're also in a process of looking at some mental health options for response for citizens. So that's still getting worked on within the city. But yes, we do have additional training with mental health. And yes, I will correct the PowerPoint and I will get it sent back to you guys with the corrected word. So I saw that.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Is the CIT training given to everybody on the force or selected people?
So we are working to get everybody through it. It's obviously a long process because we have so many officers. I don't know how many officers we've had go through it. I mean, I know it's up in the hundreds. We've had a lot go through it, and they offer the class, I think, a couple times a year. So not everybody's been through it yet, but we are working through getting everybody through that training. It's only been offered, and Chief Weaver, you may know better than I mean, it's been offered maybe in the last 7 or 8 years, maybe. I'm not sure.
Oh, way longer than that.
I don't know. So I'm not sure how long it's been going on, but we are working to get slowly to get everybody through, but we're getting everybody through as quick as we can. Any other questions on the use of force end that I can answer for you?
Let me add this also, if you will, Captain Allen. For those of you that are not familiar with crisis intervention training, it's actually put on by the Forsyth County Mental Health Association, as well as the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And so although we're trying to put all of our personnel through it, it takes time. Not only are we putting our sworn officers through it, but because our communications operators are the first phone call that people make to get into the 911 system, we've sent a significant number of our communications operators through that training also, so that they're able to actually deal with people that are in a mental health crisis while they're on the phone, transition that information to the officers that are responding, and then be able to, comfort some of those people who are calling about some issue that's going on with someone who's exhibiting signs of mental illness.
In addition to that, campus patrol, sheriff's department, and other agencies send people through that program as well.
And I will say, I'm sorry, go ahead. Somebody had a question.
Yeah, this is Beverly Lee. This is sort of situating to what I was giving as. Do they also have the same standards? The sheriff's department have the same standards, the use of force that you guys have, or is it they're separate?
They are completely separate, so I can't speak to what exactly they do there.
Okay.
I will say one other thing. So I mentioned at the beginning that I serve as the chairwoman of our use of force committee within house at the police department. So we have a committee within the police department. It's made up of, I think it's 7 or 8 senior use of force instructors, and we review use of force cases continuously throughout the year. And we look at whether people need additional training, how to best provide training that's meeting the needs of our officers. So if we see trends within what's going on in use of force, we are continuously looking at how we present the training or what training is presented to our staff to meet the needs of what's going on with our citizens. If we see that there's an area that we might be weak in, we deal with that. And then we also provide additional one-on-one training to officers if we see that they are not performing well in a certain area, or maybe they didn't do a technique quite right, or they didn't write a report quite right. We are constantly working to train our officers so some of them get beyond what they're offered every year in service. And that's just a checks and balances we do in-house as well. All right, so if y'all have no other questions, let me figure out how to stop sharing my screen here. I appreciate your time and thank you for having me.
This was great. Thank you very much.
And if you have any other questions, feel free. My email is K as in King, Allen, ALLEN @WSPD.org. And feel free to shoot me an email and I'll be happy to either have a conversation with you on the phone or send you a response, whatever you may need. And I'll get that PowerPoint corrected and I'll get it back to you guys with the corrected verbiage. And I apologize for that.
Could you put your email in chat, please?
Sure will. I'll put my email and my desk phone number.
Thank you. And as this committee who actually encouraged us to participate in training like you've offered tonight, I certainly want to thank you for taking the time to offer the group so that we can be more familiar with the language and the techniques that are associated with the police department. So thank you for taking the time to prepare.
Absolutely.
Katie, if you find that you're getting emails perhaps from a majority of our members, let Keisha or myself know, because we could always bring you back for another
Sure.
meeting to share that
Absolutely.
information. But
Absolutely. Thank you, Angela.
All right. So do we have any other business?
Madam Chair, if I may have a moment. I
Yeah.
sent you an email, but I thought I would let everybody know. I did go back to the statute. It's 166A as an apple dash 19.24 B5. And this is in reference to voting by secret ballot or written ballot. And it says all votes shall be roll call, no vote by secret or written ballots, whether by paper or electronic means or in accordance with 143, 318, 313B may be taken during the remote meeting. So it's not allowed. Now, when we go back to in person, there may be some other options, but for remote meetings, it's not allowed. So I just wanted to reiterate that and share the statutory reference.
Thank you for checking on that.
Yeah,
So
and you all
quickly.
did a great job, by the way.
So any other comments or thoughts or questions?
Just for, this is Beverly, just for myself, the April 17th meeting, I will need to attend that, and that will be my last meeting.
Well, technically you serve until you're replaced. So if you don't mind, we would appreciate your continuing to come until you've been notified of a replacement.
Okay, that's no problem. I'm not anxious to get off. I just wanted to make sure. So you kick me off when you get ready, huh?
No, you'll be notified when you've been replaced.
I mean, the replacement won't be before the April 17th meeting.
Trust me, I really doubt that, but you'll be notified as well as the
All
other
right.
board members, and you'll get a nice letter from the mayor's office. But no, I appreciate your serving until you're replaced.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I think the date is actually April 21st. It's what I have on my agenda.
Oh,
So,
okay.
just so there's no confusion. So our next meeting is April the 21st, 6 o'clock, presumably remotely.
I would say that's a safe bet.
Yep. So if there is no further business.
Well, Madam Chair.
Yes, hello.
I just wanted to point out tonight's training came about as a result of a request from the body as a whole. So if there are other topics of interest that you would like, other presentations, please feel free to reach out to either me or Charlene and let us know so that we can reach out to the appropriate staff and make arrangements for those. We will have a presentation at the April meeting from Captain Gomez regarding the Winston-Salem Police Department's rules of conduct, but we do not have a training scheduled for the July or October meeting. So if there's another topic that you're interested in, please let us know.
Great, thank you. All right, any other business?
We have a visitor.
We do. Yes, we do. It must be Annika Jr. Hello there. You're on mute.
Hey. Say hey.
Hello there.
Oh, I was kind of wondering what y'all talking about. Oh, hey.
Well, I was completely in phase, so I'm like, oh. Yeah, he got it. He's showing off his muscles.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. So cute.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all so much.
All right. Do I hear a motion for adjournment?
I make a motion that if we finish with everything, that we adjourn at this time.
Do I need a second, Angela?
A second that
second
motion.
Okay, we got it.
I won't make you do a roll call vote. I think we're good.
Okay,
Everybody say
Thank
aye.
you.
Wants to adjourn, we'll take an aye.
Okay. Thank
Any
you.
objection?
All right.
Any
Thank you.
objections? I do not. You all take care.
Thanks.
And
Bye.
Captain
Bye-bye.
Allen, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.